what actually sounded like an obituary reference. These very detailed biographies, I think, are not desirable, but nikal do. Acha, it'll fall off. Can I leave it here? Can I repeat the request of our organizers and say that please switch off your mobile or cell phones, those of you who have not had a chance. Morning, everyone. I would very much like to thank our organizers, Mr. Roy, Mr. Shivanandan, and the Bombay Police, Mumbai Police now, for giving me this opportunity to be here. And this is very special for me in more ways than one. I was born in Pune, and I did my early education in Khadakwasla at the National Defence Academy. And subsequently, I came to Bombay in 1968 to complete my training when it was still Bombay. And over the years, it was Lonavala, Pune, etc. So to be back here in Mumbai and to share a panel along with eminent people like our former president, Dr. Kalam, and Mr. Shamal Datta, and Shri M.J. Akbar. It will be difficult for me to really, I think, make a significant contribution because so much has already been covered, both by Dr. Kalam, our former president, and now you just heard one of the most comprehensive overviews about the challenge of terrorism from Shamal Datta, who as a former director IB, I think amongst the few people in India, it is the IB and the DIB as we call him, who has a very deep understanding about the nature of the problem, the nature of the challenge that we are facing today. And since the Mumbai Police has, I think, very thoughtfully sustained this effort, and Mr. Roy has told us that this is the third such seminar that has been organized in the fight against terrorism. I have been an analyst for the last 20, 25 years of my life, so I have a little more of a luxury to stand back and think about some of these issues and offer my own interpretation about the fight against terrorism and what could be done. So 3 or 4 broad points, if I may. That when we talk about national security and the fight against terrorism, these are interlinked. And I do want to acknowledge and recognize that there are many people in this audience, I met some of you over tea, who have already spent a lifetime dealing with these issues, who have actually spilled blood. And here I would like to specially mention some people I've met this morning. Admiral Audito, who's sitting here, our first Gallantry Award winner in the Goa operations. We have Shri N.K. Singh, very senior police officer, amongst others. You'll pardon me if I don't recognize all of you. People like Toby Simon from the corporate sector who have also engaged in issues that pertain to national security and more importantly now terrorism. My own submission to you, this is a vast audience of diverse backgrounds. In the course of his remarks, Mr. Roy used a very interesting term. He said that India has a dubious record in the fight against terrorism. And I think it's a very well-chosen word. It's a brave word for the DG Police of Maharashtra to say that our track record, if you look back at it, I study this. I have been looking at India's grapple, India's contestation, India's fight with the scourge of terrorism. Actually, over the last almost 63 years, you might say that October 1947, when independent India was dealing with what happened in Kashmir at that time, it was the first, if you will, challenge of terrorism of a certain type, in this case consciously supported by another state. And India's response from then to now, the track record, I fully endorse what Roy Saab said, it has been dubious, it has been lackluster, it has been less than adequate. And if there is one word that one can use for the Indian experience, the characteristic, I would say it has been reactive. India has not dealt with the scourge of terrorism, the challenge of terrorism in all its variants. We are not talking only about what Mr. Shamal Datta had mentioned about Pakistan and the radicalization of religion and the distorted interpretation of jihad as we are now dealing with. But there are many forms of terrorism that India has been dealing with. Some of them are domestic. We had reference by Dr. Kalam to Maoism, LWE, and so on. But I am suggesting, and I hope we can take this up in the QA, that India's response has been reactive. And if we recall Mumbai, the attack in November 2008, more recently, what happened both in Pune and in Kabul, I would submit for your consideration that India is dealing with a war, a proxy war. And India is dealing with it in a reactive manner. And I would even go to the extent of saying that all the indicators that we have to make an assessment about the nature of the challenge, and for the time being, I'll confine myself only to the external dimension. Over the last year, I had occasion to visit Pakistan. I had occasion to visit Afghanistan. And I come back with this deep and disturbing conviction that perhaps our challenges are going to increase. Whether it is a Kabul, whether it's Pune, that what we are now witnessing is a certain increase in the intensity of the war that is being prosecuted against India for a variety of reasons, whereby Kabul becomes a theater, Mumbai was a theater, Pune was a theater, and we are likely to see more such manifestations. And therefore, the first advocacy or plea, if I may use that, is that to the extent that for the last 60 odd years, our responses were reactive and episodic, that now with what the Mumbai police has demonstrated post-Mumbai, post-November 2008, that our effort now will be more sustained and will be more effective. And the word equitable has been used more than once, both by Dr. Kalam and by Mr. Shamal Datta, that the way in which we are going to deal with the scourge and the challenge of terrorism will be more equitable. It has to be across the board. The fight against terrorism cannot be reduced to just increasing security for VIPs. We need Bombay VT, we need Chhatrapati Shivaji as symbolic of the kind of security that this country and its people need, that it has to be equitable. And therefore, what I shall attempt now is, as an analyst, to try and look at this in as objective a manner. And just as the pathologist in medicine offers the preliminary kind of diagnosis, I'll try and outline the contours of the challenge as I see it. And then, if time permits, we can try and look at some of the prescriptive suggestions that we could all agree on this morning. One is that when we talk about the nature of the terrorist challenge that India is now facing, the external and the internal overlap. We do not have that luxury saying that India